Chelsea. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you what will hopefully be a fairly concise series review of a trilogy that I've been reading over the last couple years or so that I finally finished this month, and that is, the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy by Juliet Marillier. I've been following this series as they've been released, although I've taken some time to actually get to each of the books. The first book in this series was Dreamer's Pool, the second was Tower of Thorns, and this is the third, Den of Wolves. I've gotten them out from the library, so I don't own copies of any of them, and I have only this one out to show you in physical copy right now. I'll put pictures here. So Juliet Marillier's books for me are pretty consistent reads. I haven't met a book of hers that I haven't liked. I also haven't met a book of hers that totally blew me away. They're either 3 or 4 star reads for me, and that's pretty darn good. For the most part, the books of hers that I've read have been historical, fae, fantasy. She writes both adult and YA. I don't think her Shadowfell trilogy was historical. I think that took place in a fantasy world. But these books definitely fit the bill of what she's best known for, which is medieval historical fantasy set in Ireland with a focus on fae lore. In this trilogy, though, what she does is something a little specific and a little unique, which is to integrate a sort of mystery series element into the trajectory of the 3 books. Each book follows the progression in the story arc of the main characters, but each book also introduces a new set of secondary characters that present a magical mystery that Blackthorn and Grimm manage to solve. Each of these mysteries has an element of magic to it that Blackthorn is able to pick apart because of her understanding of folklore and of matters uncanny, as well as practical elements that Grimm is able to figure out because people underestimate his intelligence. And I thought that sometimes this dual storyline premise worked really well, but sometimes it bogged the books down and made for slightly clunkier storytelling than I'm used to with her writing. That said, these are generally shorter books than, say, her Seven Waters series, which she's best known for, and I felt like they read more quickly. In the first book, Dreamer's Pool, we meet Blackthorn, a woman who used to be a healer and a wise woman, but who has been imprisoned under terrible conditions for a year by a local chieftain for trying to bring his injustices to light. She's offered a mysterious deal for her freedom by one of the fae, who tells her that he will allow her to escape under certain conditions. One, that she travel to this other region and live in this particular settlement, that this settlement is in need of a healer and that she'll take up her craft again while she's there. 2, that she not refuse help to anyone who asks her for it. And 3, that she not seek her vengeance against the chieftain who has wronged her for 7 years. She agrees to this bargain and escapes along with one of her fellow prisoners, Grimm, who ends up being her traveling companion. Now, I want to point out that I think one of the greatest strengths of this series is the emphasis on a female protagonist who is not young. She's not old by our standards, but by the standards of this world, this time period, I think she's in her mid to late 30s. She's not considered young, she's not considered beautiful, and she's a character who has a really intense, heavy past. And I think it's a good and positive thing to see more female protagonists like this in fantasy series. That said, I also got very frustrated with Blackthorn, especially in the first book and a little bit in the second book, because she is extremely bitter and she is extremely angry. And it's very hard for her to let go of those things, and it's just exhausting to read about. And specifically, her bitterness and her anger make her, I think, willfully ignorant as to the nature of the bargain that she's made and how it's actually going to end up working in her favor. And to me as a reader, it was incredibly obvious from early in the first book how following these rules were actually going to end up getting her the vengeance that she wanted, much more so than recklessly heading off and seeking vengeance on her own against a powerful chieftain. She and Grimm take up residence in this community called Winter Falls, which is where the prince, who is the son and heir of a local king, has his residence. In the first book, this prince has a problem with the arrangements for his marriage. The woman who has shown up, who is meant to be his bride, does not seem to be at all what he was expecting her to be, and he fears there might be something magical or uncanny involved, and so he enlists Blackthorn to try to figure out what's going on. She has major trust issues with men and authority figures, but of course she has to try to help. So I was a little disappointed in this first book. I gave it 3 stars, in part because of the dual element of the whole setup for the series, the prison escape, the Fae bargain, the weight of Blackthorn's emotional baggage. All of that on one hand felt like it was awkwardly juggled with this sort of romantic mystery plot that was going on with this prince and his lady. I found that I cared for certain characters more than others. I didn't care much for Grimm in this book because you actually don't learn much about him at all as a character until the second book. You get point of view chapters from both him and Blackthorn in all 3 books, but in the first book, there just wasn't enough about him to make me invested in him as a character. I was much more invested in Blackthorn and also in the secondary plotline. In the second book, Tower of Thorns, though, we get to know a whole lot more about Grimm, and it was in this book that I started caring about his character as well. I gave Dreamer's Pool 3 stars with the hope that the series would improve. I think the series really did improve. One of the most interesting things about the writing of the series is that the 2 protagonists' narrative voices are so different, but they complement each other as characters very well. We slowly come to realize that there's a lot more to Grimm than meets the eye. He doesn't have much of a sense of self-worth, though, and in the second book, he starts to have his own journey of healing unfold, and that's nice to see, and it made the story feel much more balanced to me. The plot of this book has to do with a journey that Blackthorn and Grimm make at the request that they visit this lady on her lands because she has a mysterious howling monster in a tower on an island on her lands. The monster howls all day and is only quiet at night. The lady has told them that they have until midsummer to solve the problem, but it's clear that she's also withholding very important information. I gave Tower of Thorns a 4-star rating. And in this third book, Den of Wolves, we're back at Winter Falls, and Grimm is hired for a building job at a place called Wolf Glen. Meanwhile, the landholder at Wolf Glen has sent his daughter Kara to Winter Falls to stay with the prince and his wife, and Kara is heartbroken and homesick because she doesn't know why she's been sent away. Meanwhile, Blackthorn's old enemy has been causing trouble on a massive political scale, and she might actually get her chance at vengeance in an unexpected way. Well, unexpected for her. I saw it coming from book 1. I thought this was probably the best book in the series. There were a lot of themes coming together as you would expect for the final book in a trilogy, and I particularly enjoyed the secondary plotline in this one. Kara was a character I was able to identify very strongly with, and I gave this book 4 stars as well. I want to address something about this series, though, that annoys me a bit, that has nothing to do with the books themselves. I want to talk about the cover design. These covers are absolutely gorgeous. You've seen the first 2, I'm holding up this one, but they don't have the main character on them. As I've said before, Blackthorn is a character who is not described as young or beautiful. And I think that's one of the strengths of this series, that it relies on that sort of female protagonist. But every single one of the books has a cover art depicting the female character from the secondary plotline. So this one has Kara on it, and she is young and pretty, and so were the other 2 ladies. And yes, I may have initially picked that first book up at the library because the cover was so dang pretty, but I also feel sort of conflicted about that. I feel like there's a message here that the publisher doesn't think they can sell this series to its primarily female target audience with the main female character on the cover, that instead they have to put characters who are more aesthetically pleasing on the covers of the books, even if those characters are side characters and not at the emotional core of the story. So all in all, what I like about this series the most is the folklore element that drives each of the 3 stories, as well as the fact that this is a fantasy series that focuses on personal journeys instead of epic journeys. I like the way it deals with magical perils, but the true evil in these books is really human evil. If you've read these books, I'd love to know what you thought. I'd be happy to answer any questions that this review didn't answer for you. Anyhow, I hope you're having a wonderful day. That is all. Bye for now.